We're back. These are the three panelists that I had mentioned before. We're going to open this discussion up to them so that they can ask questions and possibly get the right answer from us. So it will be an open discussion, and it is unscripted. Okay, do you have any questions since I last spoke? Anyone?
How many girls was there to attend?
There was supposed to be 4 girls to each tent. However, the tent that Doris and Lori and Michelle were in, they were supposed to have a 4th girl, but she had been misassigned and put in another unit. So there was only 3 in their tent.
So with that being said, they can pretty much conclude that this was a random killing.
Yes, because see, no one knew where these girls were going to be assigned or anything, other than maybe Barbara Day and her husband, who were the directors of the camp. So a lot of people have said, well, because Doris was African American, that they were targeting her. They didn't know if Doris was going to be in that tent. They would have had to have special knowledge from the director's office to know that. They said because her father was a Tulsa police officer, that she was targeted. All those things are random theories by people who have no earthly idea of what this story was all about.
When they set out to name Gene Hart as the main suspect in this case, they didn't take into account evidently that he was more known in his criminal history as being a thief. And yes, he was a rapist, but he had shown no predisposition toward little girls or any of the brutality that was shown toward these little girls.
Or being a murderer. I mean, he was never investigated for any murders. He was never investigated or charged with anything concerning small girls or small boys.
So basically the MO, even though he was chosen basically to be their suspect for this and take the ball for it, the MO doesn't even really fit him.
No, it didn't. There again, that's why I'm saying, if you're going to, my limited knowledge of how an investigation comes about, they would automatically have brought up suspect lists of people living in the area that had a propensity for rape, especially of little girls, and a known murder. And they would have brought these names into the potential investigation list. Am I not?
That's correct. That's correct.
And then they would have questioned them. Where were you at the time? Can you prove that you were at such and such? Do you have an alibi during this time period? Carl Myers was never investigated.
And also one other item to remember is these 2 women that he raped were both pregnant adult women. And you know, during investigation, when you go out and you are looking for suspects and types of suspects, their probation and parole has a list of all of the felons, the child molesters, the sexual offense offenders. All that is something they can obtain and use as their own database to go out and start questioning people.
In your opinion, as an investigator, wouldn't it be? It would almost be uncharacteristic of somebody who obviously has this violent tendency toward pedophilia, given the violence of this crime. He wouldn't even match the MO at all. I mean,
It's non-characteristic.
right.
Non-characteristic of him to do that.
It would take somebody though that has a history of this to pursue something so.
And they don't
Great.
stop. They enjoy what they're doing. They don't stop. They continue to do it until they are stopped.
That was the point about Carl Myers, is that he had already been convicted of raping 2 little girls once he was charged, because they ran to the parents. The parents demanded charges be filed against him. At that point, once he got on a bond, he started killing again, but this time he would rape and kill them simply because they couldn't be running to the parents. And so he was smart enough to realize that, or maybe it was suggested to him, if you're gonna do that, Carl, don't leave any witnesses behind. We don't know what went on behind closed doors.
When Myers confessed to you, did he ever mention an accomplice?
He never, no, I don't remember him ever involving anyone else. It was a thing like he was bragging, look what I did, I think he was very proud of the fact that he was untouchable at the time. In that he could say or do whatever he wanted to, and they were going to protect him, and they did. There was one law enforcement officer, but he was a sheriff in Pittsburgh County, Kansas, who actually tried to bring Carl to justice. And when he spoke with and I'll tell you exactly what he told me, when I tried to get Ottawa County, Oklahoma, to cooperate in investigating Carl, I ran into a brick wall. They would not give me any assistance whatsoever. But this, of course, is understandable in that they wanted to protect Carl, and by doing that, they were protecting themselves. So,
Was there any evidence that you know of that showed that there was that would connect them two together?
Carl and Jean?
In Gene?
I've had two accounts. One, Carl did say that he knew Gene Hart, and we do have a witness that said that he saw Gene Hart, Carl, and another man, unidentified man, together on the backside of Camp Garland, which of course was just on the other side of the highway from Camp Scott. So.
It would seem odd to me that they would single out one man and try to put this crime on him when A, he doesn't really fit the MO, B, that where the little girls were attacked in the tent, it would be very difficult. And as an investigator, wouldn't you say that it would be very difficult for someone to commit that heinous violent crime in a tent with 3 little girls, and 2 of them would not know about it, without being silent about it? There's just not, it doesn't seem to me like one sole person could carry out such a heinous crime and then not have the other girls wake up or be aware of it.
From looking at the crime scene based on what you just said, I would think there would be more than one person involved in the killing of those girls. I would think there, and based on shoe prints, 2 different shoe prints, large or small. There again, it was raining at the time of the crime. The counselors were at the other end of the complex at Camp Scott. All these factors play into it, but it would seem to me that there's more than one person that was involved in the crime.
I can understand how it may be, being a camper myself, I know how noisy it is in a tent when it's raining and so forth, to mask any kind of noise or anything, but it would look to me like that it would have to be more than one accomplice, because it would be very difficult to attack and subdue 3 little girls like that at one time without one of them having a chance of escape. So I just find it kind of odd that they would try to pin a crime on one man, when obviously, in my feeling, there had to be multiple
Tim, the reason,
participants.
the whole point of that, they wanted to keep it to one man simply because that ended their investigation of searching for anyone else.
Right.
If they had left it open, well, this could have possibly been done by another person with Gene, or possibly a third person, or however many. Then they would have had to keep their investigation open looking for the other possible suspects. But by naming Gene Hart and Gene Hart only, it shut down any investigation where they didn't have to look at other people, including Carl Myers. But by certain individuals that were involved in the investigation, from the sheriff's office to the OSBI, possibly to the FBI, they were protecting any other investigation by keeping the focus on Gene Hart and Gene Hart alone. And there's still today, but Buddy Fallis made the statement that he, even though Gene was found not guilty, that he still believes that it was Gene Hart and Gene Hart alone. Agent Mike Wilkerson, same thing. It was Gene Hart alone. They have to keep it to that, or they open themselves up to that they did a very, very poor job, and not only a poor job, but inadequate and possibly just being stupid as far as their investigation was.
To me, being a layperson, just looking at this on the internet and, doing my own personal interest investigation into it, I would have to say, in my opinion, it's the most botched law enforcement evidence
Well, you have to
chain
understand.
of custody and case that's ever been.
You have to understand that from looking at this, OSBI, they were all under the gun. Governor says, get it solved or get split up. Well, when they get split up, their little empire crumbles and falls. So what they're gonna do is they're gonna find the easiest person they can to try to hang it on, and that's what they did.
And I don't really think the OSBI first came up with Gene Hart. Sheriff Pete Weaver was the first person that mentioned Gene Hart, and he had, of course, personal reasons in that Gene Hart had embarrassed him so much, not only escaping once from the Mays County Jail, but twice. You have to realize he had escaped one time prior to the Camp Scott murders. Then when he was convicted on the 2 rapes of the pregnant women and other burglary charges, he got a 307-year sentence, and he was sent down to McAllister, Oklahoma, at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, OSP. And he was only back in Mays County on an appeal. Well, while he was on the appeal, he escaped again, along with Larry Dry. And I believe Larry Dry was a potential informant who had made arrangements to help the authorities in finding Gene Hart. But, so he had shamed the sheriff twice. When the sheriff first got there, and I believe he was the first person there by Michael Wheat's statement on the internet, he immediately went to and saw the bindings on, I believe, Doris, and said, well, that's the same knot that Gene Hart used in when he tied up those women in Tulsa. Well, number one, Tulsa County was not his jurisdiction. Second of all, he probably would have no knowledge of the particular events of that crime, since it wasn't his jurisdiction. And third of all, that was a stupid, ignorant statement for him to make when that particular knot probably would have been used just in that one day over the United States, probably 500,000 times. There's only so many knots that a person can tie, what we call nautical knots. And they're used every day by everyone, whether it be a slip knot or a noose, how you tie a knot for a noose, square knot, on and on and on. But there's only so many knots that could have. So for him to make that statement was ridiculous. That showed his prejudice with Gene Hart. Why didn't he say it? Well, I could be a suspect. I used that knot the other day,
It seems to me that, given the evidence that I've seen given in testimonies and on the internet and so forth through research, newspaper articles and whatnot, it seems like everybody had something to gain by just simply letting Mr. Hart take the blame for it.
They did. They did. That was the whole plan. He was going to be the scapegoat to keep OSBI running and everybody in place where they were at, so they could continue on with how they were doing business.
That's what I was going to, what I had originally said. Pete Weaver brought up his name first. Well, of course, the OSBI, under pressure by the governor's office, automatically jumped on that because, hey, that sounds good. He's not only a convict with a large sentence, but he is also guilty of raping 2 women. Yeah, let's go with him.
He has I agree that he has a criminal history, but the pedophilia and the brutality does not match.
No, it wasn't his MO. So
Criminal profiles that they didn't, yeah, they're both criminals. However, the type of crime that was committed, you know, violent pedophilia, you know, crimes that are committed.
It's a particular breed
It's a
that commits
particular
that
type of
of
individual that's
depravity.
gonna do that, and they thrive on it, and they don't stop. They keep on doing it till they get.
Now, I will mention something that possibly you haven't considered. 3 bodies, they were taken out of the murder scene, from what we gather, or what I have gathered, is that 2 of the girls, Lori and Michelle, were killed inside the tent, while Doris is still alive and drugged outside the tent. But all 3 bodies were in the same lump put together. Why did they take them out of the tent? And why not leave them in the tent? Because they were going to be discovered, you know, at some point. But with Carl had a propensity to go to water or wooded areas. I believe that they were going to move them elsewhere, dump them in a strip pit, like Carl had done on several occasions, or take them away from the crime scene for whatever reason. And I believe when one of the camp counselors woke up to take a shower, she wanted to get up early before everyone else was up. That interrupted them, and they just dropped them where they were.
But that was very convenient to be in sleeping bags and take them out to the strip mine pits, weight them, drop them. You know, that's very convenient.
As a mother, I just want to know why you think there wasn't better supervision during that time for the girls.
Back then, there hadn't been any crime like this before. That's what made this so much of a national story, is that up until that time, this gruesomeness, attacks on little girls at a Girl Scout camp, or even a Boy Scout camp, hadn't taken place before. People, you know, back then in Locust Grove, people left their doors open or unlocked. They weren't fearful of what could happen. But after this happened, everyone said, you know, they started locking the doors. You know.
Well, you know, back 37 years ago, let's face it, we didn't hear of the homicides and all these other things and school shootings like we do now. Yeah, there was those isolated things, but they usually happen in big cities. We didn't hear about them out here.
Right.
So, you know, people sent their kids away to, I mean, what's safer than a Girl Scout camp? And you've got counselors there and what have you. No one would ever imagine someone going there and killing one of their children.
But I will mention, Ronzi, the Girl Scout camp they had camp counselors, and they ranged anywhere from 17, 21, 22 years old. They were young girls themselves, and they were camp counselors and were put in the different units, and they were the ones that directed the girls when to get up, go to the mess hall, what activities were going on. However, with the Boy Scout camp, Camp Garland, which was right across the highway, they were always supervised by adults, usually by fathers. In my case, when I was there, it was my grandfather who was there. So they usually had 5, 6 adults in each unit. Why the Camp Scott never did that, I have no idea. It seemed reasonable to me. They should have instituted that when they first opened up the camp years before.
Right.
Detective, in your personal opinion, when you look back at this, what do you feel like the motives were with these murders?
Well, let's hold right there. We're going to take a break, about a 5-minute break, and we'll be back.
Okay.